Yesterday the subject came up, Jubilee and Jesus' return. I told you I think he's going to return on the Jubilee year. And so this morning I thought, why not put something together on this? The Sabbaths are important to God. Everybody that's here understands that. But not everybody that even keeps the Sabbath, I know a lot of you do, but not everybody that keeps the Sabbath understand that that's how God identifies who his people are. So let's look at that first. Exodus 31:12, it's in other places, but I chose this one. It says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep. For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you." It's plural here, it's plural in other places, but it's not just the weekly Sabbath. Mary and I were growing up, we were told it was Saturday. Well, that's a good start, but it doesn't end there. Because where we went, they didn't keep the holy days, or, well, some of them did, but they had to do it in secret and hide it. Saturday. The 7 annual holy days. The land Sabbath every 7 years, and now here's where people kind of get, even to keep the holy days, they kind of, don't know a whole lot about that. And it doesn't matter if you're city folk or living on a farm, we should know about this. We'll talk about it briefly. Each one of these we can go in and look at them, well, the Saturday Sabbath, many studies. But then the Jubilee, and even less know about that other than somebody that's trying to make money and sell material, books, videos, and stuff like that. So let's talk about the Jubilee and Jesus' return. What happens if someone refuses to obey God, refuses to do any of this? Well, we can see in history where it's happened over and over in the Bible, but Leviticus 26:23, start there. It says, "And if by these things you are not reformed by me, but walk contrary to me, then I also will walk contrary to you. And I will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. And I will bring a sword against you that will execute the vengeance of the covenant. When you are gathered together within your cities, I will send pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. When I have cut off your supply of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven." I'm going to come back and talk about that for a second. "And they shall bring back your bread by weight." In other words, it's rationed, it's rare. "And you shall eat and also not be satisfied. And after this, if you do not obey me, but walk contrary to me, then I also will walk contrary to you in fury. And I will chastise you 7 times for your sins. And you shall eat the flesh of your own sons, and you shall eat the flesh of your own daughters." Now, when Israel throughout history would start being disobedient to God, they wouldn't do what he said anymore. Ultimately, it came down where the Sabbaths were rejected also. This isn't limited to the Sabbath, but the Sabbaths are included in here. Let me put it like this. Probably 15 years ago, we were down in Panama City Beach for the Feast of Tabernacles, and Dr. Andre he put on a couple seminars at night, and people asked questions and whatever. And he came to me and he asked me one day while we were down there, he says, I tell he was disturbed. And he said, "Why do so many people associated with the Sabbath have so many problems. I says, what are you talking about? He says, well, all kinds of problems. Money problems, health problems, problems with their families. And I said, health problems? All you do is you see sick people all day long. What do you mean? He says, no. Compared to the normal population, and you take a look at people that keep the Sabbath, and it's much greater. The percentages are much higher. And he cares about people, and a lot of you know who he is, so you know. And I told him, I says, that's easy to answer. He said, what's the answer? And I says, when you claim to be part of that covenant, when you commit yourself to God, and you say, I want in on this, I will serve you, I will obey you, I will follow you, and then you refuse, I says, there's blessings for doing it, and there's also cursings. And here's one of where it talks about the cursings. And when you think about it, over and over, 7 times over, and if that's not enough, I'm going to do it another 7 times over. And it goes up exponentially. And the point is not to punish us, but the point is to bring us to our knees so that we repent. Because there's benefits and there's responsibilities that go with that. And when we refuse to obey and refuse to do what God says, that's where the curses come. It's not because he hates us, doesn't like us. We might need some of those chairs. But he is mad at us, but he tells us over and over. All right, so I'm going to continue on verse 30. Verse 30 says, and I will destroy your high places, cut down your incense altars, and cast your carcasses on the lifeless forms of your idols. These are the kind of things that happen when you stop obeying, when you refuse to do what God says. You go off into the pagan practices. And he doesn't, human reasoning, at first glance anyhow, you'd think, the people that do these pagan things, which God says are evil, those are the ones he should be punishing, not his people. Well, no, he doesn't punish them. He hasn't called them. He hasn't opened their eyes. They don't understand. You don't punish somebody. If somebody has a mental disability where they can't comprehend things, you don't punish them because they lack this comprehension. Well, they have a spiritual disability where they can't see these things. How many times have you looked at the Bible and read those words and they meant nothing to you? And then one day, you're praying, you're studying, you're asking God to show you, and all of a sudden they jump off the pages. He uses the Gentiles, the pagans, to punish his people when his people start doing the things that he forbids them to do. They know better. All of these things start falling in line. When people leave and walk away and quit going anywhere, doing anything, whatever, a lot of them, they end up back in a Sunday church. Even before they get there, maybe Christmas, Easter, the pagan holidays, they start coming back or compromising. And it's a slippery slope down to just sin. And it's hard to comprehend because they know. And people just say, wow, they were never truly converted. Well, Yeah, or maybe there's a million and one reasons. You hope that they didn't know it wasn't really there, because some of these groups that have kept the Sabbath for decades and decades, and then the group falls apart and the people go back to doing what they do, or the group gets taken over from the inside and they go back to, they switch to Sunday worship and things like that. But God's not happy with this. So verse 13, it says, or 31, I'm sorry, I will lay your cities waste and bring your sanctuaries to destruction, and I will not smell the fragrance of your sweet aromas. I will bring the land to desolation, and your enemies who dwell in it shall be astonished at it. I will scatter you among the nations and draw out a sword after you. Your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. Then, after they go into all of these pagan things, then look what happens. It says, then the land shall enjoy its Sabbaths as long as it lies desolate, and you are in your enemy's land. Then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate, it shall rest, for the time that it did not rest on your Sabbaths when you dwelt in it. So this is something that's important even for God. And people say, the land has a Sabbath. Well, we'll get into that a little bit and talk about it a little bit. But that's not observed in this country. That's something that's really strange. Some individuals here and there, I'll say, well, like the only person, there's more than him, but the only person I know that does this on a regular basis is Frank Zemlicka, that has a farm. I've never been there, but I know he's talked about, and I've asked him to tell others, and I don't remember what it was. I don't remember the time. I think it was corn. Maybe it was wheat. But one year, his neighbor asked him, he says, what did you plant? Where did you get your seed? And he told him. He says, well, that's where I got mine from. But Frank told me, he says, at the fence line for the property, you came to the fence, and here's his neighbor's crop. And it was the 6th year when this happened. It was harvest for the 6th year. They come to his fence line, and it jumped like 2 feet. It's not something you could miss. Visually, you could see it. Now, his brother tried it and didn't work for his brother, but his brother did things with the Sabbath, like he didn't milk his cows on the Sabbath. And they all told him, even in the church he was in, at the time, worldwide church, they told him, we got to milk your cows, and the other farmers were telling him you have to. He didn't. They didn't get mastitis. He would cut back on what he's feeding them Friday afternoons, get them all penned up so they're not out there eating so much. Milk them as late as he could on Friday. And then as soon as he could on Saturday after sundown, he'd be out there milking them. He says, and boy, they were ready for it. He'd open up the barn, and they were just trying to get in there as quick as they could. But doesn't work for everybody. I think a lot of it is tied to what you really believe and how much you're willing to do for God. And I don't know. I don't want to get off on too many stories because it'll be too long. But next, I want to show, and a lot of you know, but I want to share with you what started my journey on just not the weekly Sabbath, the annual Sabbaths, the holy days. Years ago, I don't even remember anymore how many years ago. It was before Emily was born. And I'm going to screw it up now. Going to be 22, is that it? 22, all right. So it's been a while, but I'm reading this verse. And I've been keeping the holy days for quite a while. And all of a sudden this jumps off the page at me. And from this, I've looked at other Sabbaths, land Sabbaths, every 7 years, the annual Sabbath, every Jubilees. Deuteronomy 31, verse 9. Let me read it. Shut up, read it, and then talk about it. So Moses wrote this law and delivered it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, at the appointed time in the year of release, at the Feast of Tabernacles, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God in the place which he chooses, you shall read this law before all Israel in their hearing. Gather the people together, men and women and little ones, and the stranger who is within your gates, that they may hear and that they may learn to fear the Lord your God, and carefully observe all the words of this law, and that their children who have not known it may hear and learn to fear the Lord your God, as long as you live in the land which you cross the Jordan to possess. So I'm reading this, and it says, and I know I've read those verses, but it never registered in the past. Is this anywhere else in the Bible that they've done this? So it started the study, the learning, to the point where I'm not trying to offend people, but if you keep the Feast of Tabernacles and you don't do this every 7 years, why? Why? Well, the first thing when I started talking to other people and asking them about it, they said, well, we don't know which year is the 7th year. And I said, you're absolutely right. I've never heard anybody talk about it, much less, I'm sure they do, but I've never heard anybody talk about it, much less what's the correct year. He says, but you know what? We got a 1 in 7 year chance of being right. And at that point, I figured out how many years it was, 20-some years at least, or probably close, whatever, that we've kept tabernacles. I says, you know what? We owe them. Way overdue here. I didn't know. I can't change what I didn't know and didn't see, but I can change what we're going to do in the future. And then all the naysayers came. Oh, you can't do this, and you're stealing my ministry, and what you can't expect the children to be here for that, and on and on and on it went. But the bottom line is we've done it 4 times now, every 7 years. It is possible. You can survive. We did it last year. But the Sabbath, that 7th year, it's not just about reading the law at the Feast of Tabernacles. There's more than that you do that year than that. But that is required. If you've never done it and you've kept the feast for more than 7 years, then do it. Initially, Mary and I, we got so much flack, we said we're going to do it ourselves in our room. That's what we're going to do for our feast. If that's what you have to do, do that. But better yet, if you keep the feast somewhere else and they don't do it, go to them and ask them, why? How come? And if they tell you, you don't know for sure what year it is, that ain't an excuse. What if you were on a desert island, you were in a coma, and you woke up and you don't know how long you've been out? If you're a man, you got a little bit of a beard now here, and say, what day's the Sabbath? You can't look up in the sky and determine which day is the Sabbath. What would you do? I don't know what you would do. I know what I would do. I say, well, I got a 1 in 7 chance of being right. I hope it's on Saturday. I'd ask for a sign. I'd ask them to show me something. I'd ask them to just give it to me in my head. But you'd have to start somewhere. The land has a Sabbath. What happens when you violate this? In this country, I know a little bit about what they do. When we weren't married very long, a few years, and the company I worked for went on strike because it's all unions up in Wisconsin, and So we didn't have a lot of money, and that strike pay ain't that good. So I went and got a job for the Department of Agriculture that summer while we were on strike. And my job was to go out to the farmers' fields and measure them, because it's a federal program, but every state does it a little different. But they call it a set-aside program. They take 10% of their land and set it aside, and the government pays them not to plant. Now, that's really stupid if you ask me. But if you're a farmer and you say, well, wait a minute, I don't have to buy the fuel, run the equipment, do all the work, and they'll pay me for not doing it? Well, a lot of them do it. Measured a lot of fields that summer. But that's not 1 in 7. That's 1 in 10. So even doing that, and the farmers would cheat because they take the worst parts of their fields and set that aside. But anyhow, there's automatic blessings and penalties if you do that. You know what the automatic curses are that we all suffer because of it? Because we don't keep the land Sabbath? You say, well, you're zealous on all of this law stuff. Well, whether you know it or not, and most people don't, there's automatic curses. Basically, to oversimplify everything, you're raping the land. Now, we think we can buy penance for that. We can use fertilizer, after World War II, the artificial fertilizers, the nitrogen and other things. You can plant year after year after year, and you strip all the minerals out of the ground, and you just put petrochemicals, and you put these chemicals in there. And then you got to go do things called like hybridized seed to try and increase your yields. And now, even though it really doesn't increase it, they've got everybody convinced GMO, Frankenfood. That's what it is. It's what it is. And even if it's organic today, it's still foodless food because the minerals, the nutrients are gone from the soil. So they're growing this organic food, which is a whole lot better than what, the GMO Frankenfood stuff. But the nutrients aren't there. It's missing. Whether you understand it or not, you still suffer the penalty. And then, what is it? I can't remember the exact numbers, but cancer. In the early 1900s, it was like roughly 1 in 50. Today, it's almost 1 in 2. And you say by 2050, it'll be 1 in 1. That means everybody gets cancer. Diabetes. When I was growing up, there was a few people, and I had a cousin had type 1 diabetes. No kid had type 2 diabetes. Nobody. It was unheard of. Now there's 8 and 10-year-old kids with type 2 diabetes. And it goes on and on. So there's blessings and there's cursings. And the problem is if you know, or if you claim you're part of the covenant, the good news and the bad news, we're responsible for this. So quit looking for an excuse and just say, okay, God, if you say do it, I'll do it. Even if we don't understand it. Even if we don't do the best we can. I still remember, and this question, I had forgot about it for a while, this question come up on trumpets. The first day of the 7th month, wait a minute, somebody had never observed it before. It's September. It's not the 7th month. Well, God does things differently. But the first time something like that came up, there was a couple that were in the church. Their first Passover they kept on January 14th because they read in their Bible on the 14th day of the first month, and that's what they did. They did the best that they knew how. And when they learned, they changed. Realized, that's not in January. It's in the spring. But, so when's the 7th year? How do you know? How can you determine it? Go back to let's look at this where it talks about it here, this Sabbath year. Leviticus 25, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. What grows of its own accord, and on your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is a year of rest for the land. And when the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you and your male and female servants, your hired man and the stranger who dwells with you, for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, all its produce shall be for food. When you don't harvest it, when you don't take, the plants get the minerals from and the nutrients from the soil, they become part of the plants, and when you're not harvesting them, when it goes back on its own, it replenishes the soils. That's how God worked this. He gives the land a rest. The first house Mary and I bought, we had some pear trees and some apple trees. And we'd never sprayed them, never did anything to them. And I would ask people, hey, we kept the Sabbath, but we weren't keeping a land Sabbath there. I'd ask people, I'd say, come on, get some pears, get some apples. We had so many of them. When I cut the grass on the riding lawnmower, guess what? I'd run them over, splatter them everywhere. People would take them if I picked them, got them all in sacks, went to their house, delivered them, take them in and set them on their kitchen counter. Yeah, we could get rid of them like that. But it was like, hey, they're free. If you want them, come get them. They would rot because there's so many of them. That land got replenished year after year after year. When we bought it, it was just a summer cottage on a lake for the family that owned it. And if they were out there, they'd pick some, I'm sure. But most of those apple trees and pear trees and that, it just fell to the ground. And so it was really rich in nutrients. But God's got a system, just like he gives us rest every Sabbath, he gives his land rest also. It's important to him. There's all kinds of reasons, excuses why people wouldn't do it. They think, well, you're going to starve. Hey, you know what? There's a modern equivalent to this. We can't take off from the Sabbath because I can't afford to. We can't take off from the Sabbath because my boss will fire me. We can't take off because the business can't survive. On and on and on. You know what? If Chick-fil-A, a fast food restaurant, can close on Sunday, I think anybody can keep the Sabbath if they really determine it. And you know what? If I got a customer that tries to force me to keep the Sabbath, they're a former customer. Work on the Sabbath. The industry that I'm in, something breaks, it can cost them a lot of money per hour. They know, don't call me on Saturday. Leave a message or call me, and I get these messages. As soon as it gets tonight, give me a call, we got an issue. You got to make up for it. All right. Leviticus 25:18. Let me take a look at that. So you shall observe my statutes and keep my judgments and perform them, and you will dwell in the land in safety. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and dwell there in safety. And if you say, what shall we eat in the 7th month, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce, then I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year. And you will bring forth enough produce for 3 years. And you shall sow in the 8th year, and eat the old produce until the 9th year. Until the produce comes in, you shall eat of the old harvest. Well, I made a little graph up there. The blessing, before you ever do it, the blessing is promised in the 6th year. Now you're taking 1 year off, right? The 7th year. He's given you 3 years of produce in the 6th year based off of your commitment, your covenant to obeying. It's like getting paid before you ever would get the money. Earn it. Do it. It's not just like, well, I'll give you double so that you come out even. I'll give you triple. And you come out ahead. And there's a physical reason for that too when you get to the Jubilee, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. It covers that too. But I wanted to put the harvest, you know what? Over and over and over. What if, whatever you do for a living, if every 6th year you got paid triple, and then you took 1 year off, and then you go back to work again, and after 14 years, you're 2 years worth of pay ahead of time. Just think of it in simple terms like that. You know, I make it simple. I make $10,000 a year. So I'm going to work for 6 years. I got 60 grand and I spent it all, but then on that 6th year, I didn't make 10,000, I made 30,000. Well, now I got my 10,000 for next year and I don't even have to do anything. And especially like if you got a farm or a garden or anything like that, that's the perfect year. Get your maintenance done. Work on the equipment. Get ready. Just let the land rest. It's harder, I understand that concept, for a farmer to do because that's their 100% of their livelihood. But somebody that's got a garden in their backyard and we can't do that? Now, many people do, but not everybody does. It's like, how much faith does that have to take? Come on, wake up. But let's look at what happens every 50th year on the Jubilee. Go back up a little bit because I skipped over this part, Leviticus 25. I want to go back to verse 8. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. So even there, it's a Sabbath of Sabbath years. 7 times 7 is 49. Shall be to you 49 years. Verse 9, then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month on the Day of Atonement. Well, there's more that goes on the Day of Atonement also. Every year is the Day of Atonement, but the Day of Atonement marks the time that you start these Sabbaths of years. And you shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land, and you shall consecrate the 50th year, and shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all of its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee to you, and each of you shall return to his possessions. Here's where some neat stuff starts happening. And each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee to you, in it that you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is the Jubilee, and it shall be holy to you. And you shall eat its produce from its field, and in the year of Jubilee each of you shall return to its possessions. And if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor's hand, you shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy from your neighbor. According to the number of years of crops, he shall sell you. So if you buy it in the first year, it's worth more than if you buy it in the 48th year. According to the multitude of years, you shall increase its price, and according to the fewer number of years, you shall diminish its price. For he sells to you according to the number of years of the crops. Therefore you shall not oppress one another, but you shall fear your God, for I am the Lord your God. Well, that's something that's not observed here. We just don't do it. But think about it. When people make mistakes or something bad happens to them, even if it's out of their control, and they lose things, every 50 years, God sets it back, returns it. It's not always our fault. Sometimes we make dumb things. We moved to Tennessee in '86, and I had sold part of my company to Mark Marietta, and I thought I was a hot shot. We went out and got a really nice house, and it was really good, and it had a really big payment too. And then when I lost the business, and we didn't have any money, and there was nothing coming in, I thought, what am I going to do when I grow up? So I went and took a little part-time or a full-time job at Pilot, third shift. And then I opened up an insurance agency, and I worked all night long, and I'd come home, sleep about an hour, and then go work all day long, and then I'd come home and sleep 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours, and then I'd go work and just over and over, except for when it came to the Sabbath. Then I wouldn't work. But we lost that. Every few years we might drive past it. Really wasn't my fault. But in situations like that, growing up in Wisconsin where there's a lot of farms, they had this farm aid, because back in the late 70s and 80s with the economy, they were foreclosing on farms that were 3-generation farms. And people were getting thrown out. Willie Nelson and some others, they went around, did concerts trying to raise money. And so I saw a lot of that going on there. But no matter what happens, whether we do something stupid or it's beyond our control, we lose it. God says that the land is his, so he gets a right to demand that we keep it and feed it and tend it like we're supposed to by keeping a Sabbath year. But if we lose everything, we have to sell it, or it's foreclosed, or whatever happens, every 50 years, no matter what happened, it's returned back to the way God originally distributed it. That's why you got a house? That's good. You own it? That's good. It's even better if the bank don't own it and you just rent it from the bank. We don't own our property. We got properties, but we don't own them. First time I don't pay my tribute to the county, after 3 years, they're going to come and take it away from me and show me who really owns it. It's not ours. It really belongs to God. He only gives it to us. It's like it's not our money. We got a job, a business, whatever. It's not our money. It's his. Good news, he lets us keep 90% of it. Because I can't afford to tithe. Really? Well, if you're poor, it's not much tithing you're going to do. I can't afford not to. Because when I wasn't tithing, even when I was making good money, I was still broke all the time. But anyway, I'm not talking about tithing. I'm talking about Jubilee, restoration, putting things back the way they're supposed to come back. Leviticus 25:23 says, "The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. And in all the land of your possession you shall grant redemption of the land. If one of your brethren becomes poor and he has sold some of his possession, if his redeeming relatives comes to redeem it, then he shall redeem what his brother sold. Or if the man has no one to redeem it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since the sale and restore the remainder to the man who he sold it, that he may return it to his possession. But if he's not able to have it restored to him, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Jubilee. And in the Jubilee it shall be released, and he shall return to his possession. And if a man sells a house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it's sold. Within a year he may redeem it. Verse 30. Oh, I didn't have this. Yeah, well, I didn't have it on for anybody on the internet, sorry. Verse 30. But if it is not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to him who bought it through his generations. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. However, if the houses of the villages which have no wall around them shall be counted as fields in the country, they may be redeemed. They shall be released in the Jubilee. They may redeem it any time. And if a man purchases a house from the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall be released in the Jubilee. For the houses in the cities of the Levites are there in their possession among the children of Israel. But in the field of the common land of their cities they may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. All right, Leviticus 25:39. And if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave. As a hired servant and a sojourner, he shall be with you, and he shall serve you until the year of Jubilee. Then he shall depart from you, he and his children with him, and he shall return to his own family, and shall return to the possession of his fathers. So he set up a system where if you're poor, you find yourself in a bad situation, and you have to sell yourself. People say, well, that's really archaic. That's really ancient. People sell themselves all the time to General Motors, to Honda, to Toyota, to Dow Chemical. You become an indentured servant to that company. They tell you when to come to work, what to dress like, what to wear, what to do when you get there. And you say, well, this is a really bad master. I'm going to go find a different one. Then we just pick our shoes up and pack our stuff and walk out the door, and we find another person to sell ourselves to. But we weren't. If you were in on the covenant, you didn't sell yourself as a slave. There was a difference. You were a servant, not a slave. No different than we do today in this country with corporations. Now, the Jubilee year. Ezekiel 47:17. Let's look at that. But if he gives a gift of some of his inheritance to one of his servants, it shall be his until the year of liberty, after which he shall return to the prince, but his inheritance shall belong to his sons, it shall become theirs. So God even protected your descendants, your children, your children's children, that it would return to them. He set up a system that if we followed it, we wouldn't be dealing with Mr. Drysdale at Third National Bank and be a slave to them forever. And for every house you buy 3 houses for the bank. What happens when Jesus returns? I want to get to the Jubilee itself, a Jubilee in the future. And this is some speculation, but it also says in the Bible things that are going to happen. And if I'm wrong, we'll find out when he returns, and then it won't matter, right? All right. Isaiah 61:1. Let's look at that. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. That's the main thing I want to get out of this verse. What is the acceptable year of the Lord? What year is it talking about? I'm going to propose to you, it's the Jubilee year. The Jubilee year. And the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. Well, those last few words, couple verses, I recognize that's a song we sing every once in a while. But this acceptable year of the Lord, that's a big deal. Even sounds important if you don't know what it's talking about. Is it a one-time thing that happened centuries and centuries ago? Or is this something that happens in everybody's lifetime? Let me put it like this. If you are 50 years old or older, I don't know when the Jubilee year is. I can't tell you. But I know that I have experienced one. Did it happen whether I knew it or not? Yep. Did it happen whether anybody was keeping it or not? Yes. Even the 7 years, the things that we're supposed to do every 7 years, did that happen? Does God know when it is? Yep. So why is it hidden? Because there's theories and people that claim that they know, but you get them all in a room and none of them agree with each other. Oh, maybe if you got 10 people on the 7th year, maybe you'd have 1 or 2 that agreed, a couple of them on which year to. But they got a 1 in 7 chance. And when you get to the Jubilee, it's even harder after that. So I want to show you something in history. I know not a lot of you know this, but let's look at something that happened in history that most people know the story, but don't know all the details. Some do, but everybody doesn't know the details behind it. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 15. And the Lord God of their fathers sent warnings to them by his messengers, rising up early and sending them because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets until the wrath of God arose against his people, till there was no remedy. Yeah, it's happened before. It happens now. This isn't something new. But first he wants to warn them, sending them prophets to tell them to wake up and change their evil deeds. They didn't like what they had to say, what he had told them to say, and so they kill him, refused to listen. Verse 17, it says, therefore he brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion on the young man or virgin, or on the aged or the weak. I'm going to put a little tick mark here because I forgot. I told you before when it said that the bread will be rationed and 10 women will make the bread for one man. And it says, going to come back and talk. I forgot to tell you about that. Why? Why? Because there ain't no young man or older man. They're all dead. Not all, but 10 women has nothing to do with what goes on in private. Protection, help. Unlike what the world says, there is a difference between men and women. And most women cannot do some of the physical things that a man can do. There are some that can. I've met a few of them. Fire department's a customer of mine. There's some women on that fire department that I wouldn't want to get in a fight with. But they're far and few between, okay? They're looking for the protection. They want to make the bread. You need a man for some things. The men are dead. It's bad news for the men. It's bad news for the women because they're vulnerable. They're in danger. God takes care of those things, and he sets things out like for the children. Their father's dead. They're vulnerable. They need that. There's so many things. But this is what he's trying to warn them over. This is why he sends the prophets. And they didn't want to hear it. So back to what I was saying here in verse 17. He gave them all into his hand. Verse 18. And all the articles from the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and his leaders, and he took these to Babylon. They burned the house of God, broke down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all its palaces with fire, destroyed all the precious possessions, and those who escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, where they became servants to him and his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia. To fulfill the word, and here's the whole reason for him, verse 21. To fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. As long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. Why were they in captivity in Babylon for 70 years? Because Israel went 490 years and refused to keep the land Sabbaths. And you know what? If they weren't keeping the land Sabbath, I suspect they weren't keeping the Jubilee either. Tell me that that doesn't mean something to God. That there's not an important reason he set this up for us. Made it part of his covenant. And when we refuse it, it's so important, he's going to let his own children suffer in captivity so that the land gets its Sabbaths. Let's go back and look. This is where God commands us to keep the Day of Atonement. There's so many things happening on the Day of Atonement. And like I was talking about yesterday, everybody concentrates on fasting. That's not the main thing. That's something we do on the Day of Atonement so that we can do other things, to learn, to represent, to... It's not what the Day of Atonement is about. Now, granted, when you hear about it, that's the first thing. 24 hours? No food, no drink? That sounds like really, really hard stuff. I don't know if I can survive this. But if we never get past that point, you'll never understand what the Day of Atonement's really about. So Leviticus 16:29, let's take a look here. This shall be a statute forever for you. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall afflict your souls. You shall do no work at all, whether a native of your own country or a stranger who dwells among you. For on that day, the priest shall make atonement for you to cleanse you, that you may be clean from all your sins before the Lord. It is a Sabbath of solemn rest for you, and you shall afflict your souls. It is a statute forever. And the priest who is anointed and consecrated to minister as priest in his father's place shall make atonement and put it on the linen clothes and the holy garments. Then he shall make atonement for the holy sanctuary. And he shall make atonement for the tabernacle of meeting and for the altar. And he shall make atonement for the priests and for all the people of the assembly. This shall be an everlasting statute for you, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And he did as the Lord commanded Moses. It's forever. It's not temporary. It's not optional. It's part of God's covenant. Anybody that says that they have a relationship with him, we need to do this. So the Day of Atonement is really, really important. And how's that all tie in with the Jubilee? Let's take a look this might have been a Jubilee year. I didn't have time to look today to see what time of year it was when Jesus did this. But he talked about something in Luke chapter 4. I'm going to start in verse 16. It ties in with the Day of Atonement on the year of the Jubilee. It pictures the return of Jesus. And I want to take just a few minutes and take a good look at what is actually said here. Because this is what he was alluding to. He didn't quote the whole thing. He stopped short. He stopped short for a very good reason. But they all knew what he was talking about when he said it. Luke 4:16, it says, "So he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written." Then he starts quoting out of Isaiah in verse 18. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." And here we go again with that phrase, that statement. So then he closed the book and he gave it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Well, why didn't he quote the whole thing? It's one question. What happened after this? What was he talking? These things he's talking about captives being set free and things being restored, sight, even sight on the blind, and that all fits in with what the Day of Atonement is about, and specifically the captives free and all that the Jubilee is about. He stopped. There's more. But they, like I said, they understood what he was saying. And then he says, "And it's fulfilled in your hearing today." They started talking about, isn't this the Joseph's son, the carpenter? Like, we know who this guy is. How can he make a claim like this? Then Jesus went on and said, well, no prophet is accepted in their own country. He reminded them that there were widows all over in Israel. But Elijah went to Sidon to save a widow there, not the widows that were right there in God's city. He said there's lots of lepers that were in Israel. But Elisha heals Naaman the Syrian, not any of the lepers that were supposed to be part of the covenant with God. Well, anyhow, they went berserk. It says they grabbed him and they took him to the edge of the city. They wanted to throw him off a cliff and they wanted to kill him. They knew what he was claiming and saying. And he says he disappeared into the crowd. He escaped. So what was he quoting? Let's go back and look at the whole thing, all right? Isaiah 61, verse 1. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified, that they shall rebuild the old ruins, they shall raise up the former desolations, They shall repair the ruined cities, the desolations of many generations. Oh, this is talking about more than, this is a one-time event here. This is talking about when he returns. Think about it. Everything is set back the way God intended it. Captives are freed. Things are restored. Verse 5, strangers shall stand and feed your flocks, and the sons of the foreigner shall be your plowmen and your vine dressers. But you shall be named the priests of the Lord. Anybody see that connection with Revelation where it says we're going to be kings and priests in the first resurrection? It's talking about this is when that happens. They shall call you servants of our God. You shall eat the riches of the Gentiles, and in their glory you shall boast. Verse 7. Instead of your shame you shall have double honor, and instead of confusion they shall rejoice in their portion. Therefore in their land they shall possess double. Everlasting joy shall be theirs. This talks about there shall be no more tears. This is talking about his return. How can we say, well, the Jubilee doesn't really mean anything, or we don't know nothing about it, or it's got no meaning for us? This is talking about our Savior's return and what it all points to. Even if we can't figure it all out, don't you want to learn as much as you could possibly learn? And ask him, once you've learned that, ask him, give me more. I'm still hungry. Verse 8, for I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery for burnt offering. I will direct their work in truth, and I will make them with an everlasting covenant. Here he's talking about that. Verse 9, their descendants shall be known among the Gentiles, and their offspring among the people. All who see them shall acknowledge them, and they are the posterity for whom the Lord has blessed. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall be joyful in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation. You know, maybe just put on your robes of righteousness that it talks about in Revelation. Maybe there's got more to it than what we actually realize. He has covered me with a robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom decks himself with ornaments, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels. For as the earth brings forth its bud, as the garden causes the things that are sown in it to spring forth, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to spring forth among all the nations. So why did Jesus stop when he stopped? Because what comes after that doesn't happen until he returns. They knew, or a lot of them at least, knew what he was implying. They went berserk, they went crazy and tried to murder him. He was making the statement that he was the promised Messiah. It was fulfilled through him. And that those prophecies, those promises from God, were about him. They rejected him. They rejected that. And their answer was kill him. But they weren't successful in that yet. It took them a little longer. But he came and he proclaimed the acceptable year of the Lord. And this is something we all need to look at deeper. But you start with the weekly Sabbath. Then you learn about the annual Sabbaths. Then you learn about the Sabbath every 7th year. And then after 7 of those, then comes the Jubilee. It's a theory of mine, but when people said, well, we don't know what year it is. And I says, yeah, but we got a 1 in 7 chance of being right. If we knew when the Sabbath year was for sure, then it might be possible to figure out when the Jubilee is for sure. If it was next year, we were able to figure this out and we said, wow, hey, guess what? It started yesterday, or a lot of people Thursday. How serious do you think that people would be if we found out that that was announcing the Jubilee year? Now, on the other hand, if we found out that it was year 11, how serious do you think people are going to be? You're going to have everything from, well, I'm young, I'm in my 20s, I'll worry about this in about 30 years from now. Or you might even have some people saying, man, I'm in my 70s, I'm kissing 80, or I'm in my 80s, I'm kissing 90. Well, when the old ticker starts to go, then I'll get serious. I'll start keeping everything else. Or if I get the pronouncement of doom from the high priests of modern medicine with their white robes, they put their curse on you, then I'll get serious. First I'll say, why me, Lord? And then I'll start doing what he says. Or, well, we got plenty of time. My boss won't let me have off on the Sabbath. I'm going to retire in 2 years. I'll start keeping the Sabbath then. Whatever the excuse is, I think God intentionally hid this from us because he knows our character and he knows what we can do. But we also forget that even if you're young, or even if you're in good health, or you don't have nothing to worry about, you got plenty of money in the bank and everything is going good, you don't know what happens tonight. When you get in your car, turn that key, and that big metal bomb that you're going to project down the road, you don't know it could be over tonight for you. So, what's the solution? Same as everything else. You prepare like it's 50 years from now, but you live like it's tonight. How many people say, well, I know all the prophecies about what's going to happen in the mark of the beast and this and that and the next thing and on and on and on. I'm going to get serious later when I see this stuff happening. You don't know. There's no guarantee for any of us. And really, if that's what's in your heart, you ain't making the cut anyway. You ain't in the game. I feel for her. But no matter what the cost, be a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Our God can save us, but even if he won't, we won't bow down and serve you. The Jubilee is a big deal. The Sabbaths, all of them, and this is one of them, is a big deal. And when he says that this is the sign between me and you, so that we know who the God is that we worship, is 3 out of 5 good enough? If that's all we know, yeah. If it's not, maybe we need to seek him diligently with all our hearts, all our might, and all our soul. He says he searches the hearts of his children. Think about how sad it is. There were times when he was looking for somebody righteous and it says there was none. No, not one. You know what? Even if we're generous, it's just a percentage, not a huge percentage. But if he's searching the hearts for those that are righteous, what's the whole purpose for the Day of Atonement? What were we supposed to do? Put the world's garbage aside? Get on your knees and pray. Ask him to lead you. Ask him to guide you. And then when he shows you something, come out of your corner like a mother bear protecting her cubs. Ferocious. Even the bear hunters, when they see this mother bear charging at them, if it's a cat, if it's a dog, if it's anything, you see that coming after you? Our Father is greater and more powerful than anything that Satan can muster up. Quit cowering and hoping we can blend into the crowd and start being, love them so much that you'll do it no matter what the cost. Thank you.